Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am Karan Kukreja, the Project Director for the Cyber Warriors Conclave. Thank you all for taking your time to join us. Today, we are connecting with the senior executives responsible for protecting their company's critical infrastructure with innovative solution providers and information security experts. We will learn from them how to protect and defend our businesses from cyber attacks during interactive panels and fast track discussions. Thank you to our sponsors, Mimecast and Asimily. The conclave will start off with a presentation on how to protect sensitive information with cybersecurity for healthcare by Mimecast. Then we will have another presentation on comprehensive IoT and medical device cybersecurity platform for healthcare by Asimily, and the final presentation on information security and risk analysis in healthcare by King Fahd Military Medical Complex, followed by a panel discussion on the evolving cybersecurity problems in healthcare with participants from King Fahd Military Medical Complex, Ahsa Health Cluster, the Council of Cooperative Health Insurance, RAK Hospital, and Mimecast. And another panel discussion on how healthcare providers can address cyber threats with panelists from Hamad Medical Corporation, Emirates Healthcare Group, Zuleika Hospital, Asimily, and Faki University Hospital. I would now like to call upon Mr. Anup Das from Mimecast. The screen is all yours, Anup.
Thank you, Karan. Great. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon to all. Thank you for joining. We're almost at the end of the summer and looking forward for the good weather to kick in this region. We also have remedied the pandemic and even schools are returning to normal. My children are going back to school this Sunday. That's great news for the people over here. COVID-19 pandemic not only drew a global eye to healthcare sector, but also fundamentally altered the industry's day-to-day operations in a way it's going to go a bit more longer even after the pandemic is remedied. But if you look at the previous year, the advent of pandemic shifted, I would say, millions of people who were in public sphere to relative safety of their homes. So we all work from home, but only increased the dependency of technology. Now, remote telehealth consultations has seen a great leap. I was reading the other day some article. It said it was averaging almost 35,000 online consultations a day in the UK. Last week, when I want to check my vitals, I contacted Medcare and they said, you have consultation online and they can even come to your home and fetch your samples. So I see that shift in this region as well. And whenever we speak to our healthcare customers, they all say all the companies have adapted collaboration tools like Teams, Slack. We are now talking on Zoom. And there is also a heavy dependency on collaboration platforms like Office 365, Google. Now, these tools pose their own set of cybersecurity challenges, right? Let's investigate some of the trends, the challenges in healthcare, and how we can mitigate them. Great. So thank you, Karan, for giving me this opportunity. It's a privilege to be here. This is a quick disclaimer from us. Now, looking to the healthcare services and cybersecurity, if you look at the current vertical, since the pandemic, there has been a lot of challenges. Revenues are down, budgets are constrained, And there is this continuous rush to transform, and it has, made the organization to play this catch-up in the cybersecurity game. Now, most of the cyber threats organizations face today are not new. We have been on connected devices. We have been hearing about ransomware. There has been insider threats. Now, these risks will be ever present. It's a reality. What's new that COVID-19 assured a 360-degree shift in the business, in turn exponentially intensified the cyber risk. So I was glancing through an Aon report some time back, and it shows that there is a massive increase in data breaches, and cyber risk stands at number 3 now. We've been hearing a lot of emails getting spoofed, employees being targeted, or brands getting impersonated or exploited, and a lot of human error and a rapid increase in ransomware, especially in this region. Now, on top of the ransomware, in 2021, you will be presently ongoing risk from criminally funded, foreign states. They might be using their own private enterprises, hacking aligned to the state-sponsored activities and interest. Now, all these threats are imminent, and no one is spared in this, current situation. And if you look at the news, it's very interesting. We are no more looking at today's weather report. It's more about the cyber security breaches. You can see the threats, coming in from different regions, whether you're in Australia, Singapore, India, or even in UAE. There is a massive uptick in cyber risk, especially on healthcare. When looking at the root cause of these attacks, I would say ransomware was the most prominent, accounting for whopping 55% of breaches. Hackers mostly use email as one of the common entry points, but if you look at only email threats, the first quarter of 2021, it's more than 64%. This is an article which came on Gulf News. Over 102 million healthcare records exposed by cyber attacks in the last year. So this region is not spared. And our industry is at a risk. And the whole digital force is a target, I would say. So healthcare industry, if I talk to most of my peers in the industry, they say it's long, busy days, and there is hardly any time to educate the staff or educate themselves about the online risk. Now, most of the CIOs or CISOs in the healthcare industry, they're ready to spend, they're ready to increase their spending on cybersecurity. But with these new threats uncovered every day, it is difficult for an organization where an organization would be better off investing their budgets. Now, hospitals are, they have a lot of incredible amount of patient data. Most of the data are confidential. That's worth a lot of money, and hackers try to get it, sell it online. And that's one of the reasons healthcare is a growing target. So it's the responsibility of the CISO, the organization, to protect the personal records of patients. Absolutely. And with regulations coming into play, I would say it's becoming more important for the hospitals to keep it more tightened, to make sure the information is secure. Now, what's happening is hackers know that medical devices have been used in healthcare, and they may not contain the patient data by itself, but there is a threat against medical devices which can also cause hackers getting into the other network devices like laptops, computers. This can be an opportunity for them to get inside the environment and install a costly ransomware. Now, keeping network devices secure wherever possible, that also helps to limit the damage that can be caused by an attack on healthcare brand. Now, we've been getting a lot of access privileges now. So whether it's a bank, a hospital, you as a patient get to log into their portal and access your records. Recently, what has been happening is there is a lot of impersonation on these large hospital brands. The bad vectors spoof the digital assets or even the website as it is, spins off, and then start fetching the information. So there is a need to protect the brands as well and protect the digital assets in terms of the healthcare vertical. If you look at this particular slide, this is how a typical healthcare industry stack up. There's a need to explore the most pertinent cyber risk to the healthcare organization, and then map them to the key cybersecurity controls, determine the actions your organizations can take to close that gap. So if you look at most of the healthcare organization, a worst case scenario is someone getting inside the environment, a middleman. Yet only 36% of organizations report that they have regular like penetration test, or they might have the best in class email security, best in class EDR, next generation firewall. But are you doing a drill? Are you performing a threat hunting? If you look at email is becoming a lifeline for hospitals, and there is a need to classify the data, number one. Number two, when you classify the data, you need to have strong controls on content examination so that you know exactly what is coming in, what is going out, what is even exchanged internally. Industry password management is taken very seriously. Most of the organizations are adopting strong controls. However, when we went through research, only 17% of the customers had deployed multi-factor authentication, MFA. This means the passwords compromise can still lead to sensitive data compromise or initial intruder access. Now, healthcare is highly regulated. In this region, we have EDHICS. You go to Europe, we have GDPR, HIPAA in the US. So however, the industry still lacks maturity. And it's a challenge to classify data. The other challenge, I was talking to my peers in the hospital, they said, okay, we have to adhere to this particular regulation in this region. How about if we expand our network of hospitals to another country? So 37% of organizations report not having an adequate approach to manage cybersecurity and the regulations. That's a reality. Sorry. Cool. Now, it's interestingly, if you look at today's news, you can see that there's a lot of robotics, AI, and IoT in place. I was reading a message once posted by Tim Clark, the president of Emirates Group. He said, guys, there is a storm coming, and if you don't get on it and deal with it, you will perish. So I think that's more prevailing to the airline. But if you look at the healthcare, I don't think we are any different. I'm not sure if you have heard of the state-of-art Da Vinci robotic surgical system. It allows the surgeon to use tiny robotic tools through a much smaller incision precision. And many hospitals which we visit today here have these tools implemented. So when you adapt these kind of transformations, there is a need to build a robust cyber defense, whether it's on application, whether it's on basic email security, or improving the awareness of brand. So you have the confidence to travel with the transformation. Cool. Now, we have all these challenges. How do we solve these challenges? So if you approach technology vendors today, all of them provide you with intelligence. Now, threat intelligence, I would relate this easily to the COVID situation. There was a lot of information for us, but we still don't have the exact information that can defend ourselves and our loved ones from getting that virus in. Similarly, threat intelligence in cybersecurity is somewhat similar because a lot of vendors are giving you the intelligence, but what will you do with that data? Excuse me. So if you ask a CISO whether it's big budget or not, CISOs at healthcare must make threat intelligence a priority and learn how to focus on the data that matters, the data that will help mitigate the future or the risks in the future. So if threat intelligence isn't part of your resilience strategy, in some capacity, you have a massive gap on your hands. And there is a chance that you might be blindsided by a phishing attack, a malware incident, or even worse. In my personal opinion, threat intelligence should be effective and usable. So when I say effective, it should be in such a way that customized to your organization, and you're able to utilize that data and implement or make changes in your organization. So in Mimecast, our team does this predictive analysis in order to stop a likelihood of an event or behavior or a trend. So we provide a lot of recommendations to our customers to mitigate risk and augment their cyber resilience. So as a cybersecurity organization, we focus on stopping breaches, but we not only focus on stopping breaches, we also do stop attackers. So which means you are aware of a breach because when it happens or there is a attack in your environment, there is an early stage of when the hacker plants that seed and develops it and eventually targets. So usually it starts with identifying a target. Maybe your healthcare vertical, hospital, or any other organization is a target. So if you're aware of this kind of activities at an early stage, this is a proactive way of stopping it coming to your organization, right? So when it comes to threat intelligence, it has to be effective and usable. Most of all, the information needs to be contextual. It needs to be consumable and instructive. And you should be able to take actions based on that. Unfortunately, most of the times when we talk about threat intelligence, we focus on the adversaries. We need to know more on the adversaries. But if you look at the intelligence, what you have so much of information to accumulate. Now you need to understand what are the capabilities of the adversaries and what kind of infrastructure they have. And what are these adversaries targeting? Who are they targeting? Which industries? Which vertical? And the geographic regions. So that information will prepare you ahead of time. Other key questions would be, when do they act? Are there any patterns or identifying timelines? Why do they attack? What are the motive? It can be money, it can be to take the data. What kind of behaviors they exhibit? So this information is very critical. And eventually, if you look at the awareness, so whatever you do, we normally say 94% of threats comes through email. And 99% of those threats are triggered by your own employees sitting behind the computer, clicking a link, downloading a file which is executable, or exchanging some kind of file. It can be an unintentional exchange, but it has a malware. Now there is a need to educate the employees, and awareness plays a very key role in here. So there is a need to educate, there is a need to test, and it should be a continuous process. Most of the time, the challenge is the awareness won't be engaging. So it's kind of boring, so that the employees are not engaging or they don't understand. They just do it for the sake of it. So if you look here, 34% of the research when we did, 34% of the UK respondents, they said they have opened an email which looked like suspicious. That 34% is way below the global average, which is 45%. Now, that itself leaves too much risk. So organizations utilizing awareness training clearly performed better than the organization which were not having an awareness training. Now, this shows the significance of improving the employees' awareness. Now, said that, all these are imminent. It will come on your way. It's how you tackle it and how you implement your technologies. Eventually, how do you connect these technologies with a shared API? So that, imagine you have a EDR, which is sharing a threat feed to an email security gateway, an email security gateway sharing it to the next generation firewall. So you're creating, an orchestration of threat sharing, eventually, getting a community defense against these cyber threats. Cool. With that, I conclude. I wish to summarize here. In terms of the top 10 takeaways, I would say email threats rose exponentially during the COVID period. Since the pandemic, as I said, 63% noted that phishing attacks have surged heavily, and they're targeting the new user environment. Nearly all companies are now using collaboration tools like Slack, Teams, but these tools do pose some security challenge. And more than 6 out of 10 companies were disrupted by a ransomware attack, losing almost 6 days of work on an average. Email security at more than 40% of business falls short in one or more critical areas. And most of them may not even have an email security system in place. They are relying on the mailing solution providers like Microsoft or Google. So it's like putting all the eggs in one basket. And 9 in 10 strongly believe they need additional layers of email security over and above what they currently use. A cyber resilience strategy that helps business adapt and respond is definitely clear, paying the dividends to the organizations. Half of the companies provide cyber security training at least once in a month. For internally us, we receive it once in 3 weeks. And it is, sometimes I do believe that we sitting at this point of the side, we have the knowledge, but we still lacks it sometimes. So there is a continuous learning required or education required for the users. Great. So I summarize, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the chat. We also have a lot of reports out there. If you visit our threat hub, mimecast.com threat hub, you get a lot of information over with regards to recent threats, what you're seeing, from which region, and what all you should be doing to tighten your defenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Anup, for that. We have one question.
Yeah.
Can I just read it out to you?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Yeah. So you mentioned about the medical devices and the other applications which become an entry point for the hackers. So what's the best practice here, and how we can stop these threats from traveling internally?
So as mentioned, it's imminent that there is a transformation happening in the healthcare, and there are new, I would say, new technologies getting adapted, new devices getting adapted, robotics coming into play, a lot of AI, ML. Now, whatever you implement, there is a need to layer it with security, number one. Number two, you might be getting the best breed of devices, best breed of applications, but ensure there is a layer of security and which can integrate with your other security controls. So a basic API integration, which may not require a lot of work. And that will help to share these threats internally and make sure that it doesn't. So we are trying to tighten the entry points here with the strongest defense available, right? I hope I answered that question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anup, for that. In case we receive more questions, we will pass them on to you. Next up, we have a presentation on comprehensive IoT and medical device cybersecurity platform for healthcare by Asimily. I would now like to call upon Luke Smith. The screen is all yours, Luke.
Thank you, Karan. Bye.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. My name is Luke Smith. I'm Director of Solution Engineering at Asimily. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Start the presentation. So I want to talk to you today about medical device cybersecurity. And this is as the distinguished gentleman before me just spoke, this is definitely a problem that is facing many of us today. We'll go over a couple of different things today. Inventory identification, we'll talk about vulnerability management, we'll talk about the cybersecurity landscape. But before we get started, I'd like to just kind of briefly give you some information about who Asimily is. We were founded in 2017. We are venture-backed. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley in North America. We've won multiple awards, including Gartner, KLAS, TIE, just to mention a few. And one of the things that's unique about Asimily is that we are 100% healthcare focused. So there are a lot of vendors out there that kind of spread their focus across multiple types of devices. Our focus is really on healthcare. And currently we are deployed around 1,700 plus sites in North America, and then expanding rapidly here into the Middle East and several different countries in that region. Now, when we talk about the landscape, if you will, and I imagine you're going to hear many presentations today about what's going on in cybersecurity in healthcare. And a couple of different key metrics I'd like to share. One, we've seen a 390% growth in CVEs. And again, those are vulnerabilities published annually over the last decade. It's a massive upturn. Now, last year in 2020, we saw roughly 50 CVEs published per day. That's per day. And that is a massive amount of risk. Now, when we look at those, of those vulnerabilities disclosed in 2020, really about 4,000 of those vulnerabilities were described as the worst of the worst, the drastic risks that were imminent threats. And that's according to the National Vulnerability Database. So when we look at this, roughly about 57% of those vulnerabilities in 2020 were classified as critical or high severity, and 68% of all the vulnerabilities recorded in 2020 required no user interaction whatsoever. So that is to say that they could be executed without a user having to click a button, having to respond to an email. That's a massive amount of risk. So when we look at that, what does this mean really for the IoT and medical device community? If we look at the threat landscape of, how are these devices deployed out there? Roughly about 10,000 plus network capable medical devices, medical device models exist today. And roughly around 100,000 of those are network capable IoT. So we're talking about a massive threat landscape. So there's a huge number of devices that are out there that this threats apply to. Now, today, averages run around 20 to 30% of an organization's devices are connected, of their medical devices. Now, we've seen that range, in smaller organizations, sometimes it's around 18 to 20%. We've seen it into the high 20s, and in our organizations that we work with. Now, by 2025, estimates put that around 60 to 70%, 65 plus, will be connected. So what we're seeing again is an enormous uptick in the number of devices that are connected to the network that are then becoming a greater threat to the organization. Now, today, about 25% of cyber attacks involve IoT devices, but by 2025, we're seeing a 5-fold increase in healthcare cyber attacks. I think in North America alone, last year in 2020, the Health and Human Services Organization releases a cybersecurity retrospective for 2020, and cyber attacks against healthcare organizations rose by almost 9,000%. Almost 9,000%. That's a massive uptick. Now, estimates here in North America are that around over the next 5 years, around $125 billion is going to be spent on security. Part of the reason for this, again, is organizations are faced with, how do I protect this growing threat surface of devices? And how am I going to manage that within my organization? How are we going to build policies and processes around how do we secure these devices? Now, in that vein, we've seen, again, there's multiple regulatory compliance standards. ADIX in the Middle East, wonderful standard. We've seen these standards evolve, as was mentioned, again, HIPAA in North America, GDPR in EU. These are, again, critical foundations to really helping to provide structure around what do we do and how do we do it to protect these devices. Now, the struggle here, again, regardless of what regulatory compliance standard you're adhering to, is how do I implement that without the support from tools to automate key functions? And that's a key takeaway that we would encourage, where possible, automate. So looking at automation of accurate identification and classification of assets. Again, a lot of tools don't necessarily detect or identify all of the different types of devices that we have in our networks these days. Accurate classification of those data sets and devices can be difficult. Safely retiring of assets is difficult. Understanding what information is contained on that asset. Does it have protected health information? Is there financial information on that device? Who are the users that have been using it? What is the impact to the business to decommission that device or retire it? So having that information and understanding so that those processes, as they're executed by staff, are done correctly every time. That's, again, a difficult thing. Really protecting health information security, understanding which devices contain protected health information, which devices are transmitting that data between devices, what's storing that data, what type of data is it? Is it biometric data? Is it personal financial information? Is it personal health information? So again, having that accurate classification, and then how am I protecting that data? What steps have been taken to ensure that data is protected to the best of our ability. And then key to this is the identification, the prioritization, and the mitigation of vulnerabilities. And we'll kind of talk about what are some of the classics that people are using today, how are people doing that, and what are some of the pitfalls with that. And then lastly, anomaly detection and mitigation. When we look at anomaly detection, it's predominantly focused around traditional IT tools for detecting anomalies within an environment. But when we look at medical devices, these are not the same as traditional IT infrastructure. There are definitely unique differences between medical devices that need to be taken into consideration when we're looking at anomalies. So how do these medical devices behave? What constitutes anomalous behavior? Not just looking at potential threats through indicators of compromise or tactics, techniques, and procedures, but actually digging in and understanding what is an anomalous behavior for this medical device can help us to identify some of these unique threats. So again, regulatory compliance standards, hugely important, and adherence to them, hugely important, but we need to automate some of these functions around these standards in order to effectively manage the compliance. So let's look at really how are people doing this today? What are some of the approaches that we see in use today? And traditional IT solutions, in many cases do a great job, but when it comes to medical devices, there are some struggles, and many of you may be aware of these. When we look at what do I do, many of these medical devices run Windows-based operating systems or Linux-based operating systems. And so there's a tendency to try and treat them as if they are IT infrastructure. And that just simply is not true. So when we look at this patching, many of them run legacy operating systems. We see a lot of Windows XP out there, Windows 7, Windows 10. Many of them are actually quite out of date in regards to their patches. And part of the reason for that is, regardless of whether Microsoft has produced a patch for a specific medical device, it does not necessarily mean that I can apply that patch to that medical device without, again, voiding the warranty for that device. So patches have to be approved by medical device manufacturers. And again, medical device manufacturers simply do not release patches at the same cycle at which Microsoft does. So we end up with this situation where many medical devices are out of date in their patching. Now, we have seen medical device manufacturers require support agreements for receiving patches. So even if a patch exists, it could be costly to receive that patch. Again, in many cases, when attacks are released or threats are released, vulnerabilities, it may take medical device manufacturers years to release a patch to patch that specific vulnerability. And again, their support for patches just does not adhere to the same cycle as Microsoft. So this creates a very difficult landscape. When we look also at traditional models for protecting devices, there's really kind of two different models that we commonly use in IT, and that's active scanning of devices using vulnerability scanning tools, Tenable, Rapid7, Qualys, just to name a few. There's, again, a ton of them out there. But active scanning means the active interrogation of that medical device. Now, we have seen medical devices actually restart, reset, or malfunction when being actively scanned. I physically have seen CTs malfunction when being actively scanned by medical active scanning tools. That means that, again, the traditional methods that we tend to use aren't necessarily effective. We typically recommend not actively scanning a medical device. Now, when we look at the other methods, it's deploy some sort of endpoint solution. And again, you can't simply deploy any piece of software to a medical device. Again, that will often void the warranty for those devices. So as you can see, this is really a very complicated situation that we found ourselves in. It's like trying to manage IT security with both hands tied behind your back. And so really, how do we go about this in a secure and safe manner for our patients? Because patient safety has to be job one. And when we look at the common answer that we're hearing in the industry, often it is segment that device, micro-segment that device, which really we kind of look at it as this kind of scattergun approach, right? Let's just shoot and hopefully hope we hit something. And not saying that segmentation and micro-segmentation are a bad approach. They definitely have their advantages, but there are still some struggles with segmentation. One, it's a very difficult and time-consuming task, especially a network engineering team, to segment and micro-segment everything. There's a high cost of manpower, and in many cases, segmentation does not solve all the problems. I still have to deal with vulnerabilities and threats for expected services, protocols, and traffic between devices that I have to have open. And again, when I don't understand how those threats are actually occurring, that means that I have threats that I'm not dealing with. So when we deal with this, some key things to understand: not all threats or vulnerabilities are exploitable. Understanding what is actually exploitable in your environment is critical. If a vulnerability is not exploitable in your environment, then it's not a threat to your organization, and for the most part, we can move on. So we recommend, again, this process here. If it's feasible and cost-effective to patch, patch. If you can understand the exploit vector and then mitigate that exploit vector, then apply a mitigation step to block that vector. And then absolutely, if you cannot do any of the rest, then apply a segmentation or micro-segmentation policy. So when we look at exploitability, again, when we look at a particular exploit or vulnerability, it may be exploitable if it's using something like RDP, remote desktop protocol. So that's a common entry vector for ransomware attacks. When we look at that, again, if a device is not using RDP, if RDP is not enabled, or RDP has been blocked to that device, then that vulnerability is no longer exploitable. If it's not exploitable, I can move on. So again, having tools that look at the exploitability of vulnerabilities is key. I need to be able to see where are the holes. It's not enough to just give me a massive list of vulnerabilities that apply to a medical device. I already know all of the medical devices are vulnerable. I need to understand what's actually exploitable. So when we look at how Asimily helps organizations do this, we really look at this across the life cycle. So from the procurement of a device, we really view that security begins at procurement. And we then work all the way through connected devices, and then ultimately to the decommissioning of a device. And how we do that, it's really a four-pronged approach. We do passive vulnerability scanning. So we look at passively collecting network traffic, zero impact to the environment. We apply what's called the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is a worldwide recognized standard for understanding the exploitability of attacks. And because we can understand what's exploitable, that enables us to accurately prioritize the threats, as well as we take medical device specific information. So manufacturer disclosure statements for medical device security, MDS2s or MDS squares, they go by different names. It's a document that's produced by medical device manufacturers that outlines the security capabilities of those devices. By incorporating all that data directly into the risk assessment and understanding how attacks can be exploited, we then get to focus on how we block those. So we then make mitigation recommendations around closing those exploit vectors. Now, this is a key concept in the process of understanding how do I attack this. And this ultimately results in adherence to those standards like 8x, ability to automate the vulnerability management assessment process, anomaly detection process, and then reduce the overall risk of the organization. So at this point, I will turn it over for any questions. Karan?
Yes, Luke, we have one question. Can I read it out for you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you believe a zero trust environment is something that the medical industry can adapt easily? Or do you see this as a challenge for the medical industry?
Yeah, great question. So when we look at zero trust at its foundation is in essence segmentation, microsegmentation. It is this concept that I'm gonna say this device only needs to communicate with the other devices it has to communicate with to provide its clinical function. And I'm gonna block or reduce all other sources of traffic or communication. Now again, great process, great concept, but does it solve all of my woes? It does not. It does not deal with vulnerabilities against expected traffic. So if I have to leave something like DICOM or HL7, or I have to use SMB or NFS, again, it does not deal with vulnerabilities that exist for those protocols and services that I still have to leave open. And so as an approach, yes, it's a very valid approach. Is it effective? It can be. But again, we have to have a comprehensive understanding of what's going on. I think a lot of times what happens is people adopt this approach because they do not understand what's actually exploitable in their environment. And that's where, again, these next generation tools that are coming out that provide that exploit analysis can help you to see. Because when we look at segmentation, microsegmentation, that's a very costly and expensive process. It takes a lot of man hours to understand, if you're going to microsegment or segment every medical device in your organization. I've only heard of in North America of one or two organizations doing that. And it took 3 to 4 years and it cost millions of dollars in effort. So again, what we would recommend is let's apply the lower cost solutions that are easier to implement, but what that is born out of is that exploit analysis to understand how are attackers actually exploiting vulnerabilities in your environment, so that I can focus my efforts on blocking those exploits and then protecting my devices. Because again, this concept that every vulnerability is dangerous, it's just not true. I need to understand what vulnerabilities are actually a threat. So hopefully that makes sense. I would love to talk with all of you about this. As you can see, it's a passion of mine. And so I would welcome any additional questions, any additional follow-up. Be happy to meet with you to discuss that.
We just have one more question, Luke.
Hi, sir. Yeah.
That one quickly.
Yeah.
Can Asimily integrate with my networking tools, such as Cisco ISC? And if so, how does this work?
Yeah, great question. So as I was telling earlier, so once I've identified where a threat is, and I know how that this is a threat, it's exploitable in my environment. What's important, again, we talk about automating adherence to regulatory compliance standards and how I reduce risk. So that means that I need to be able to automate the mitigation steps. So when we talk about blocking an exploit vector, and let's take that RDP example for ransomware. Once I know that RDP is an issue for a particular device, what Asimily does, and again, this would be our recommendation, we integrate with a huge number of networking tools, Cisco ISE, Palo Alto, FortiGate, Fortinet, Forescout, Checkpoint, there's a list. But the goal is to then push mitigation steps or mitigating controls into the networking environment and to do so properly. So that means following a proper change management process, understanding what the risk is to the organization as I apply those steps, and then automating the applying of those mitigating controls so that I can reduce that risk very quickly. When we talk about anomalies, again, when we talk about vulnerabilities, that's understanding what the risk is to the organization. And the threats that are out there are capable. When we talk about anomalies, these are real-time threats. Anomalies are threats that are going on in your world in real time. Now, once I'm in the midst of an attack or I have something that's anomalous, I need to take action on that quickly. That is not something I can sit around and discuss in a meeting for 3 weeks. And so being able to have those automation is critical to protecting the environment.
Thank you, Luke, for that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Next up, we have a presentation on information security and risk analysis in healthcare by King Fahd Military Medical Complex. So I would like to call upon Dr. Mustafa Kurban.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Dr. Mustafa. Sorry, we cannot see your screen yet, but we can see you.
No, I want you to share the screen with you. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen now.
So very quickly, good evening, everyone. I'm trying to talk about the healthcare and the security since the two colleagues that have previously talked about some of what are happening in healthcare and what are the security and how we can prevent this. I'll try to not repeat what they said. I'll try to make something that about what is the risk analysis. The risk that we already talk about it in healthcare is the process or defining and analyzing the danger to individual or business or government agencies posed by potential natural or human-caused adverse events. In typical healthcare or any organization, it might be a malfunction computers or hackers that will try to hack your system, identify or identity theft, either loss of computer or data, and information breaches that commonly nowadays is happening in the healthcare. So when we try to analyze the risk, we need to understand the landscape, why it's healthcare in particular, why these days, what are the concerns, the most concerns, and what we can do about it. Well, how can we prevent this kind of threats? I just want to show you these two pictures. As you see, the one on the left has no doors, no windows, and probably you cannot hack in. You cannot get inside, you cannot go outside. And in the picture that on the right side, you will see a lot of windows, doors. So the possibility of getting inside the house is very likely, and also break-in is very likely. So this is the sample which shows why this is healthcare, why we mean in the healthcare now. Healthcare started recently to adopt all the digital patient medical record. As Luke mentioned about IoT, using mobile technology has become so common nowadays, and increasing use of cloud computing, also the need to exchange information between healthcare. These some of the points which made the healthcare vulnerable for exploiting their data or for the breaches. In addition to that, we have also the increased number of these medical devices. I just put this picture for you. This is very simple medical devices, but medical devices get more than that. I believe it's more than 300 medical devices we can find in three different types of medical devices we can find in typical healthcare hospital. And all of these medical devices these days require to exchange information from either interface with the medical record or to send information from one location to another location. And this which also cause an issue and threat for the healthcare. Once we start to connect all these devices, you see the IoT, the digital signage, the medical devices, which Luke just mentioned. These medical devices, you cannot scan them. There is an issue. They are all operational and access through the VPN, access from outside, ease of use of these medical devices, add an additional layer of the threat to the healthcare. So the question that I ask, why healthcare? Again, the number of healthcare reported data breaches is increasing, probably especially in the United States, which some reports says there's more than 48%. The breaches every year is increasing as we add more devices or medical devices and we make ease of use of this data. We expect that data protection will become in a conflict with ease of use. So the more we make the data easier to reach, the more the data protection will be difficult. So when we do like a typical risk assessment, first we need to identify what are the thing that we want to protect mostly, since we already going to have endless number of devices, threat from here or there. We need to identify our priority, evaluate it, and continuously monitor this before the threat happens, so we can eliminate or reduce the threat later on. The major concern that we have when we try to evaluate whether the breach prevention can happen through the emerging priorities, or shall we go with IoT or with cloud computing, or we shall put it in the second priority, encryption versus and authentication. What are the technology that we want to use? For example, like some of the hospital or military hospitals, maybe they are not prepared to go on public cloud. Public cloud could be for them is an issue. So when they evaluate the cloud computing, maybe it's one of their priority, or maybe they cannot add it as their priority. Increasing usage of mobile devices, especially for public health, what we call it, mobile remote health. This is also going to be an issue, and it needs to be carefully evaluated. Finally, we need also to consider the top security priorities before we do our investments and take the decision. Finally, what we can do about it. I'll share with you the experience that from our hospital and what we do. We increase the level of awareness among the physician, medical staff We provide more training about security. We have continuous training, especially about the security and security issues that might happen, especially the update about the security. A security assessment should be conducted periodically by specialized companies, updating business continuity disaster recovery plan, implementing security internal policy. We have continuous change on the internal policy about the security, encrypting mobile devices. We try as much as we can to encrypt our mobile devices, implementing an identity and access management, encrypting electronic health record, and developing a breach detection and notification plan. This is basically what we do about it. I have tried to eliminate some of the data that or information that has been talked about it previously, so we can all together fit and give knowledgeable information to all of audience. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, please, I'm here ready to take any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa, for that. In case if we have any questions, we will pass them on to you, or during the panel discussion, we shall pass it on to you. So next up, we have a panel discussion on the evolving cybersecurity problems in healthcare, which is going to be moderated by Mr. Anup Das, the cybersecurity consultant for Mimecast. All yours, Anup.
Thank you, Karan, once again. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we are going to focus on the evolving cybersecurity problem in healthcare. The pandemic not only drew a global eye to healthcare sector, but also fundamentally altered the industry's day-to-day operations in ways that are going to stay longer, I believe. And today, a CISO at healthcare organization face multiple challenges, and there's a need to meet the growing demands of the business while adhering to the different regulations. A lot of transformation happening. AI and machine learning started to play a role in securing your healthcare organization. Also, it's critical to improve the awareness, assess the skills, educate and measure, and make the internal stakeholders more aware of how they can be compromised to minimize the insider threats and entry points. Now, to talk about this, I'm very proud to introduce you to our panelist, Dr. Mustafa Kurban, Chief Information Officer, King Fahd Military Medical Complex. We have Afnan Chowdhury, Director IT, Ahsa Health Cluster, Dr. Ahmed Al-Damas, Executive Director, Cybersecurity and Risk, the Council of Cooperative Health Insurance, and Gaurav Mantala, Group IT Head, RAK Hospital, part of the Arabian Healthcare Group. Thank you, gentlemen, and welcome to the panel. To start with, Dr. Mustafa Kurban, do you mind introducing yourself and brief us a very high-level view on your role at the organization?
Thank you very much. I'm Mustafa Kurban. I've been working in healthcare for the past 33 years of my life. I studied all my career in healthcare. I haven't tried any other area. I'm working as a King Fahd consultant in King Fahd Military Medical Complex, also the CIO for the King Fahd Military Medical Complex and other Eastern Province hospitals. I used to serve as a CEO of Saudi Society for Technology Transformation. Also, I work as an external advisor for King Prince Abdurrahman Al Faisal University in Dammam. My area of interest is mainly about health information system. My background is software engineering and business process management with change management. So this is basically me, and I'm glad to join all of you, and no issue, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. That was a great brief, and we are very proud to have you on the panel. Mr. Afnan Chowdhury.
Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon, everyone. I am Afnan Ahmed Chowdhury. I'm currently working as a Director of IT within the Ahsa Health Cluster, Eastern Province of Saudi Arabia. Prior to that, I was working for Saudi Aramco. From data center design to cybersecurity, my career spans through 18 years of diverse roles within the information technology, most of them in the UK, and very recently leading the digital transformation within the cluster. In the healthcare sector, I also worked with, that was quite long ago, from 2005 until 2007 with the University College London NHS Trust. And my background, if I remember correctly, my degree, and that was in computer science, and also I have a master's degree in innovation management. So that's very brief about myself, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Afnan. We're proud to have you on the panel. Dr. Ahmed Al-Damas.
Good evening to all of you. Glad to be invited to this esteemed panel to discuss cybersecurity in healthcare. I work in this industry for the last 15 years. 10 years before that, I used to work in telecommunication. I came from Lucent Technology, the largest AT&T company that implement the telephone expansion project, a huge project in Saudi Arabia. I have a PhD in computer science and a Master of Business Administration, and I have some certificate in the cybersecurity, CISM and CISA. Glad to be with you, and hopefully that our discussion here will be beneficial to some.
Thank you, Ahmed. Mr. Gaurav, you want to quickly introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hi, Anup. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gaurav Manaktala. I am working with RAK Hospital as Group IT Head over there. And since last 3 years, I am being there. And my total tenure being in UAE also 3 years. Looking forward, for multiple other things. My major experience being in IT is towards software and infra both. And I was earlier working in most of the hospitals only. My total healthcare IT experience is 18 years. And I was earlier with Medanta Hospital, Gurgaon in India, if you may have heard about it, Fortis Hospitals. So I have worked with multiple healthcare hospital. If you have an idea of Havells Group is a very big group. They also had 3 hospitals in India. So I was leading their complete infra and application. So this is about me. If I talk about my education, I have done MBA in IT, and prior to that, BTech in computer science. So this is about me.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav.
It's really nice to have, thank you, Anu, to introduce
Thank
me.
you for joining us.
Thanks.
Great. So healthcare globally is under pressure. There is a lot of pressure on the CISOs as well. So over the years, we have seen the tactics evolve, brands getting easily impersonated, and healthcare is a target. By the time it stopped, the damage has already happened. I can give you an example, like there is a customer login page or patient login page getting spoofed, and someone is harvesting that data. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Ahmed, what are the best practices you follow as a CISO at your organization?
Thank you very much. This is the trend of this age, which is how to get confidential information, credential user information, and steal this information. Actually, since the first phishing campaign in 1990, the technology evolved day after day. Advances in social engineering mechanism, tools, techniques to get these credentials from the users in many ways, using artificial intelligence, using phone calls, using text messages, using websites, fake websites that mimic the original trustworthy sites to get the first instance of getting to the systems. You know, everything now is digital. All the services are delivered through digital platform. Patient portals, patient informations are available. These information which used to be top secret between the patient and the doctors now are become the highest files in the black market. It is 25 times value, much more than the credit card informations. The information that a patient has is more valuable than credit information. So as you rightly mentioned, Anoop, that these will continue to increase the ways and methods of exploitation of this information. The thing is, the hackers or the advisories is they want the first step to get in, and after that, many tools used to stay in the network, stay in the system for as long as 5 years, 10 years, until they get all the information, all the necessary information, move laterally, move vertically, get administration. The only thing, the most important thing is the user. To give the user the awareness he needed is to make sure that he's opening the right website, two-way factor authentication, multi-factor authentications, methodologies, the technology people use must be implemented to make sure that these are the original websites. So there is also a lot of advances in terms of hacking. There is a lot of advances in the defense area to make sure that this is secure as much as we can. So this is the attack and this is the counter attack. Having the people be aware of the site, look at the URL, this is the right URL or not? Make the use of multi-factor authentications in order for make sure that this is the right site, the right website that he's using.
That's a great insight, Dr. Ahmed, because you focused on the value of patient information is nowadays higher than a credit card information. That's very rightly said, because if a hacker steals a credit card, you can immediately block it. When a hacker steals a patient information, he can go maybe up to 12 months harvesting that and making money out of it. Just to add on to that question, I would like to ask Dr. Mustafa. So Dr. Ahmed covered that, okay, he's facing this phishing links, this way they steal your data, all those things. You have been, sitting in a role where your responsibility is to ensure the security for King Fahd Military Medical Complex. How are you staying one step ahead to stop these attacks getting into your organization?
Thank you, Anoop. The best way always, I said, was as I talked in the presentation, is to do continuous risk assessment.
Yep.
the threats every day. They have there is a new threat, especially in care. After the pandemic, pandemic itself, it is a threat for everyone, right? For their life. Okay, so it was unexpected, something that struck out all of a sudden. It touched everybody, it touched the people's life. Okay, it mainly targeted the healthcare. Okay, and the healthcare capacity. So I think the lesson that we learned from this pandemic, that risk assessment is a journey, continuous journey that we have to always adopt it in our organization. This is what we've been doing, and this is how we predict at least the future. Nobody can predict 100% the future, but at least be prepared for what would happen. One of the good things that we did in the King Fahd military, we prepared ourselves for such kind of things. Therefore, the transition during the pandemic was easier. Some organization is better than organizations, some other organizations, when it comes to the preparedness about the security, about the easiest of the delivery. But again, the equation, if you make the surface easier to be delivered, expect at the same time the increase of the security issues.
You rightly said that. Absolutely, I agree. So enhancing the security means there is a lot of AI, machine learning, and I'm sure these are transforming the healthcare. But does it play an important role in monitoring and predicting new threats to secure your organization? This will be a question to Gaurav. So I would say, if I put it rightly, are you using AI or ML in your organization? Does it play a critical role in securing your organization? What's your view?
Well said, Anup. AI and ML these days, it is in the top. If you talk about the healthcare industry in the hospitals, we are going ahead with multiple AI-based applications, infra. If you talk about, radiology equipments, laboratory equipments, everything is AI-based. We are totally into, all the things are completely AI-based. Now, if we talk about your cybersecurity thing, which is the main concept over here, if I talk about, there is a huge impact of AI, huge impact of AI and ML. If you talk about vulnerability management is completely AI based now, right? And this is really helping us, cybersecurity, to help us in terms of securing our assets, securing our applications. Vulnerability management is completely AI based. We can, if we see, algorithms are so much designed in a way that endpoints, servers can be managed very well through AI. If we talk about email spam filters, right? It is again email. We are okay. Users can do mistakes multiple times. It's possible, right? But if we put the spam filters, email spam filters, AI based, it will help our users also not to do the mistake. That is again one of the things. Further, you talk about botnet detect. These days we have multiple applications, multiple AI-based softwares which are helping us in the botnet detection automatically, and we can save ourselves. Especially if we talk about healthcare data, it is very confidential data, and we have to keep it, in a way that nobody should be able to access this other than the healthcare organization, healthcare staff, right? Then if we further talk about, it is very easy. These days hackers are very advanced. They understand the pattern, they understand the user user behavior patterns, how to hack them. So AI is helping us to understand in advance. We have to be one step ahead, and we can easily go ahead and save ourselves. Then if further if you talk about anti-malware, data leak prevention, right? We can all do this. We can all do this with the help of machine learning, with the best available algorithms, and these tools are there in the market. So AI and ML is actually, if you talk about, they are helping us in maintaining the security. Yeah. On other side, if we see, there are possibilities. There are some negatives also. If you see, with the help of AI, we are gathering the data, right?
we are doing that. So that is again risky. So we have to be very much ahead, that this data have to be very secured. We are talking about phishing. Phishing is very common. Email phishing, and this is very common, which is there these days. Further, ransomware attacks. Ransomware, whoever is much better about it, whoever is developing these ransomwares, they're developing some applications. They are also taking a step ahead, and they're also using AI very well. They know how we can save ourselves through AI, but they are a step ahead to take advantage of these things. So just that we have to be very aware of the things in the market, and specifically if we talk about training and awareness to our employees, that should be in the #1 thing.
You said it right in terms of hackers are one generation ahead of us. Absolutely, it is always a catch-up game. One question to Afnan before I go to Dr. Ahmed. Employees remains the weakest link in this complete attack chain. And so what role does your employees play in your cybersecurity strategy? And how do you think user awareness and education programs should be evolved to compare with this ever-changing threat landscape? Afnan.
All right, thanks a lot. Right, yes, employees are the weakest link. Recently published by IBM and Polymon Institute, there was a report on data breach and how much did it cost. And that report came out very recently, just a few months back. Has some interesting insights. They studied around 500 data breaches across 17 countries worldwide, and 7 years of research data. What they find out is that the costliest industry when it comes to the data breach is actually healthcare sector. Right. Also, they found out that 23% of the data breaches happen because of the human error. Now, that's nothing new. We know that already. Our employees, our staff, our people in the organization, they are the weakest link. But also in the report, there is a new phenomenon came, and thus Dr. Mustafa touched it a little bit earlier, is that during the pandemic of COVID-19, the cost is significantly increased. Around 10% it increased from year to on. So 2020 and 2021, so the data breach cost increased by 10%. And this says is mostly due to the fact that most of our employees now are not working inside the organization building. They're working in remotely and accessing a lot of data here and there very randomly, which is an extreme challenge of protecting those data. Now, our traditional approach to cybersecurity awareness, employee training, and so on, it has to be evolved in a next level to tackle that challenge. I will touch on 6 points, inshallah. 3 of them during the planning phase of the cybersecurity awareness training, and 3 of them while we are implementing cybersecurity training. And hopefully those points will put us in a new perspective how we manage the awareness programs within our organization. First and foremost, during the planning phase, we need to know our organization very well. King Fahd Medical Complex is very different than King Fahd Hospital that we have in Hufuf, which is part of the MOH. Our organizations and the context are very, very different. One size fits all approach to cybersecurity training is not appropriate anymore. There are a lot of programs out there in the market. I wouldn't name any of them, but just randomly pick them and put them in our awareness program would not suffice the challenges that we are facing. It has to be tailored according to the level of staff and their awareness skills and so on regarding to the cybersecurity. Also, it's a long game. Just giving them a small induction during the new employee joining the organization is not enough. We have to constantly do it year and year on. And we need to set up a success metric so that we can measure our, the training program once we run it. And during the implementation of the awareness program, we have to be thorough. It's all employees. It's not the top management are immune of the cybersecurity. In fact, they are the most target of the spear phishing, if you call it, because they're the high value targets in the organization. So they have to be involved, all of them. Engaging staff during the awareness training is very important. Giving them thought-provoking sort of activity or exercises, it is really helpful. And finally, and this is my final point on that matter, is that we focused a lot on knowledge and skills build-up, the capability build-up. No, we need to focus on the behavior.
Yep.
I know how to protect myself, but when I do the day-to-day operation, I do not practice it. I do not do it. That will not help us at all. And we saw it, that a lot of awareness, trainings are like a checkbox ticking exercises. Yes, we have done that. We have finished this certificate of attendance and so on. But when it comes on the day-to-day operation, I have my password written in somewhere,
I hope it's not on the screen behind. I can see a lot of posters.
That's not password. It's the project tracker.
Anyway,
so yeah, these are very important aspects of
that's well said.
The next level.
Sorry, yeah, that's very well said, Afnan. One size doesn't fit all, and it's differs from organization to organization. Absolutely. But if you look, employees frequently are becoming participants in this. I would say participants in these attacks. Now, a question to Dr. Ahmed. When employees become participants in these attacks, they're actually aiding to the lateral movement of threats inside the organization. Now, we can say that an employee biting a link, phishing link, or accessing some files, and then eventually it is going inside the organization. It can spread to the whole organization. If someone picks it up, sends it outside the organization, then it spoils the reputation. So to Dr. Ahmed, what measures your organization takes to protect from these hidden threats?
Well, there are two things now these days are used to take a measurement in protect and defense the organization at many levels. The first thing is the layered approach, where you make sure that certain information, critical informations, are protected in a certain domain, in a certain fault, where these type of information, according to the consequences or the implications of leaking these information, will harm the organization, then you need to make sure that there is enough layers of protection to protect these information. So this is the first approach, where is everybody's among your gentlemen is aware of the layered approach. Now these days, with the pandemic and the hybrid mechanism of employees working from home or from anywhere, the layered approach start to fade away, and the new introduction of cybersecurity as a service and became more and more appealing, and everybody is going to the cloud. Giant corporation, our organization, which is medium to small organization, everybody's now is going to the cloud. Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, Google, AWS, everybody, these giants now going on the same trend. At the same token, these cybersecurity comes with the cybersecurity as a service. It comes on this strategy where you, anywhere the person or the employees will be protected anywhere he goes, avail the technology or the necessary tools to protect him and to protect the surrounding area or data of entry with the employees. So as long as we make sure that this employee is aware of that he is the weakest link, as Afnan is saying, we empower him that this is the tools, this is where are you, please make sure that to protect the value of your organization. So in this order, we can make sure that we are protected as organization and we are protected as an individual.
Great.
That
Great.
is
thank you. You touched upon. Yes.
Excuse me. I'm thankful for the organizing committee. Please, I have another engagement. Allow me to leave, and I thank everybody on the organization, on the panel, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you for participating here. Well said. Great. Continuing to Dr. Mustafa. Dr. Ahmed touched upon, layered security approach, cloud security as a service, and managing the insider threat. Now, another aspect of cybersecurity means technology are smart enough to share threat intelligence across the ecosystem. Now, this will ensure a community defense. But when you're evaluating a new security technology or a solution, how important is the integration with other technologies you have already implemented? Or I would say that connectivity between your other applications and firewalls, example.
Okay. Anoop, let me say that the technology itself could be the point of failure.
Yes.
Taken into consideration that it will serve the purpose. It's not necessary that you evaluate the emerging technology and you adopt it immediately, unless that you have the need and it will serve the purpose, the strategical purpose of your organization. Again, the ease of use of any device, or any medical device, any emerging technology doesn't mean that you are protected and your organization is 100% safe or secure. It might be the other way around. And when we talk about the technology integration, I think it's a very important in the context of the medical hospital setting. Why? Because if you've probably seen my presentation earlier, you have more than 300 medical devices found, at least, in one hospital. Those medical devices, unless it talks to each other, there is no meaning of the data. You cannot generate the AI, you cannot generate the robotic surgery later on. It will not serve the purpose of healthcare improvement and patient safety. So in the answer for the question, the simple answer for the question, integration, when you evaluate any technology is, I think, a key for either taking the technology or leave them behind.
Great, that's a good answer. So this is a question to Gaurav. So there's a lot of fear, there is uncertainty, and we've been hearing about ransomware a lot. It's growing, and these attacks are growing in frequency, especially in the Middle East as well. What's your strategy to combat ransomware, and what kind of backup and recovery tools, or what kind of recovery plan you have in your organization today?
As far as ransomware is concerned, everybody has a big fear, no doubt on that part. And as I told earlier, that hackers are much ahead of us, right? They think 10 times ahead, not just one time ahead. They think 10 times ahead how to hack the things. Ransomware is these days it's very common, and we have to save ourselves. If you know, they are working. I would say that they are working very hard, right? They are going to our roots, actually. If you talk about 2016, there was a ransomware attack, which in multiple organizations, Petya You must have heard about
yeah.
that ransomware. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this has gone to the master roots. That was really a big thing. Everybody was, now that fear increases. After these type of ransomware attacks, fear increases. So what we have to do is we have to be very careful in terms of backup, recovery, the processes we are taking. We have to strengthen our policies, so that again, awareness and training is one of the things which we have to inculcate in all of us, including our employees. Rather, CEOs these days are taking much more interest in this, to save ourselves, if you talk about. So clean backups, we must take the clean backups, right? Backup in a way that regular backups have to be done. Not just these days we are, like if you talk about cloud backups, these are cheaper, no doubt, very cheap. If you talk about the maintaining the infra in premises, cloud backup is cheaper to have, but cloud can ensure that, okay, backups are not they're not into trouble, backups are safe, okay. But in terms of ransomware attack, it can happen there also. It is very much possible.
Everyone
in
is a
cloud
target.
also, it is very much possible. Rather, people are hackers are targeting, they are making a target, okay, RAK Hospital, okay, Ahsa Hospital, okay, this hospital. How to attack a particular place, that is also possible for them. So to prevent ourselves, we have to have very clean backups, robust backups, right? And those backups should not be only on the clouds. We should have the regular backups on different medias. There is a 3-2-1 rule. Three different types of backups you can take with 2 different type of media, and there has to be one offline backup always, right?
Cool.
That one offline backup has to be out of your premises always, not on your network at all. And that you have to keep every day, so that at least these days, even the audits, if you say this is a standard point, that we have to maintain that fireproof backup, right? In a fireproof place with the encrypted backup, so nobody else should be able to hack it in any ways. Okay, then you're talking about disaster recovery. We always have to have a proper disaster recovery process in place, which RAK Hospital is also taking a step ahead, right? Disaster recovery, it has to be very, very, disaster recovery is not just that, there is a disaster of, let's say, flood is there and all those things. To get our data, to keep our data very safe from the hackers, that is also another point. So that is
you're saying that, sorry to interrupt. So you're saying there is a need to be ahead, number one. Number two, there should be different methodologies which you follow, and eventually it should be quick to recover if something goes wrong. I totally agree to that point. I have a question to Afnan. See, I was attending an event, and I met one of the CISO, and he said, when I submitted my budget requirement, he said, your projects are taking up half of the budget of the organization. And the CEO has a to-do list like 1, 2, 3, up to 10. Out of the 10, top 4 are CISO's projects. Now, we've been hearing this on a very regular basis nowadays, that CISO is gaining a great priority in the organization. Maybe we can see in the future a lot of CISOs becoming CEOs as well. Are you seeing this trend of cybersecurity more of a business decision than a technology decision? If so, why?
Yeah, an excellent question, actually. But just before touching on that point, can we refresh our mind about just a few years back, cybersecurity team was embedded within the IT team. The IT team was managing the firewall, the backup, and all those sort of things, the cybersecurity controls that we're talking about. Only a few years ago, in this fast-moving information technology and cybersecurity field, but we made a lot of progress, over the years. Now our HR, the top management, they realize that cybersecurity has to be a separate team and reporting directly to the CEO and even to the board. They are regarded as an audit team as such. It wasn't there before, but we made a lot of progress, and yes, we went there. And nowadays, as you saw, and you mentioned that, is it more and more we're seeing cybersecurity, expenditure and so on are more of a business enabler rather than like a cost center as such. It's not a technology decision we are taking by investing money on it. We are actually enabling our business. The question is how we are doing it. I mean, why we should look at more of a cybersecurity as a business enabler rather than a cost center. And these are the points actually we have to muster ourselves, to get the budget. Often we'll be challenged when we ask for money. So why you require such a huge amount? The first and foremost is the business agility. Now, every organization, healthcare sector or any other sector, are now going, 100 mile per, hours, adopting new technologies. They're competing against each other. New technologies, new way of providing services to the patients. And companies are more agile, adopting the technologies are those who has a robust cybersecurity, strategy and working strategy. 71% of the executives, they believe the cybersecurity concerns impede innovation in their organizations. If you have a weak cybersecurity strategy and the controls in place, that will hamper your business progress. So business agility require us to have a robust cybersecurity strategy and a team and is working on. And the true success of digital transformation that every organization now are aspiring to can be exploited if we have a strong cybersecurity team.
Great.
The other point is that the patient's confidence and the loyalty. If a data breach happens, we talked about a ransomware attack and so on. If that something happened and data breach happens, the patient's confidentiality is compromised. That will dramatically, impact on the patient's confidence on the organization. More and more likely patients will be asking questions about, I'm going to a hospital, I'm not sure my data privacy will be protected or not. So to buy in the patient's confidence and loyalty, we have to show as an organization that we look after your data and we take it extremely seriously. So it is a business enabler, actually. 87% of the CEO, they are investing in cybersecurity, believing in that it will build the customer trust. So the trust and build is very important. The last point actually is that keeping our business productive. If we have an attack, that will interrupt your flow operation. We cannot see a huge patients queuing up in our reception while we're saying our system is down because we had a cybersecurity incident. Rather, if we have a robust incident response plan in place, we can minimize those disruptions and make our operation more efficient and smooth. So to keeping business more productive, we need to invest on the cybersecurity controls and so on. So I would say these are the three main points of saying more cybersecurity controls, more of a business enabler rather than cost centers.
Thank you, Afnan, for that view. There is a question to Dr. Mustafa on the chat. I wish to ask, how are you trying to find a balance between investment on healthcare service and healthcare security?
Well, that's a good question. As you know, healthcare services, especially after the pandemic, is taking all the investment and very little or very few money is being spent on the investment on technology, especially for the cybersecurity and other threats. So it is a tough balance, but as I said, you need to reevaluate your position, you prioritize your needs and make your investment wise enough. My philosophy always defending is much more difficult than attacking. Attacking is easier than defending. So you need to put a lot of effort, investment to defend than to attack. You don't know when the attack will happen, what is the target, and what kind of a compromise you will face in your organization. And I will just, while I'm hearing to the panelists, I read a report that in the past 6 months, the number increased 23% than the crypto hacking. 23% in the last 6 months. So I'm saying this is not going to be in, it will going to be increased. Believe me, sooner or later, you will find that a lot of medical files will be compromised, whether we like it or we don't, even if we're going to put a lot of effort to prevent this. But that's very imminent. It might happen soon, not later. Why? Because we made it easy. Remember, for our hospital to speak, to exchange information with, let's say, Afnan's hospital, if you speak to me 10 years ago, I would tell you it's impossible. Nowadays, people are working from their home. They are using their medical devices. They're using their laptops, their iPads, and the accessibility has become very easy. So how can we balance at the end of the day, as Afnan said, or Guraf also said, that we need to balance our effort, our investment. It depends on your priority. You have to do the priority, what kind of investment you make. Maybe in the context of public hospital, the funds, the money, the budget is easier than I will be able to find the budget easier than when we go to the private sector. If I'm going to the private and I'm asking for, let's say, 40K for a firewall, they will tell me, no, it's not a priority. Wait for next year. But in the public sector, we are privileged by enough budget.
Glad to hear that. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Matter of time, we would like to conclude. Before we conclude in closing, we wish to hear one takeaway from each of you. So Gaurav, if you can say, what is your one takeaway to the audience?
Truly saying, it is really very nice to hear from all other panelists. It's a good platform for learning, number one. And no doubt when we talk to, this is the best audience we have, they're listening to us. And it would be really great going forward also if we can keep in touch all the time. So it's really a good thing. And special thank to Mimecast for doing this, taking us on this platform. So just that cybersecurity is one of the major topics. Always it will be on. So let us go ahead further. So
thank you.
To fight amongst ourselves and with other things, saving us from the hackers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you.
Afnan, to you.
Yes, cybersecurity controls are business enablers, not cost centers. Yeah, that's all.
That's a great message to the management and leaders. Absolutely. Thank you. And Dr. Mustafa, in concluding, what is the one takeaway you want to give to the audience?
I would like to answer one of the audience that we didn't answer his question.
Yeah, so that question is, what is your take on it?
Abdurrahman said some software in the hospital using external server for that company that provide the software. Is it risky? My takeaway, yes, it is risky.
Okay.
This is anything that you put it beyond your border.
Yeah.
Like you keep something out of your house. How can you protect it? Just think about it, Abdurrahman. Everyone have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Afnan. Thank you for your time. Over to you, Karan. Thank you, audience, for listening to us. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you, Afnan. Thank you, Anup and Gaurav. This was a very interesting panel discussion. Next up, we have a panel discussion on how healthcare providers can address cyber threats. It's moderated by Mr. Ramakrishnan Natarajan. Over to you, Mr. Ramakrishnan.
Thank you, the organizers, for arranging this panel. And what an amazing panel the previous panel was. I really enjoyed each and every moment of it. There's a lot of takeaways from that. And I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting panel itself, considering the topic. So before we start, I will just like to say that the questions that we are discussing today, or the topics that we are discussing today, would have different answers and different trends if in 3 different periods. I call them, I learned it from one of my friends who shared his view. I would like to share it with all of you. It's called PC, AC and DC. So PC is pre-COVID era, DC is during COVID era, and AC is after COVID era. So everything that we are discussing will have different answers and different trends if discussed in those phases. So right now, let's come back to the AC era. And let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ramakrishnan Natarajan. I am heading the IT for Emirates Hospitals group. We are a group of a couple of hospitals, 20 plus clinics, pharmacies, day surgery centers, and rehabs. And it's a privilege to be in this role. And as per my background goes, I'm a Bachelor of Computer Science. I've done various professional certifications during my experience. I have worked for multiple industries. I have been working for aviation, banking, government sectors, and most of it has been spent in healthcare. And I have more than 15 years of experience in this area. And let me ask each of our panelists to give a brief introduction about themselves. Let me start with Mr. Christos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Ram. My name is Christos Drakakis. I'm the Chief Information Officer at RAK University Hospital. I'm an IT professional for the last 33 years of my life. Actually, I didn't do anything else except IT. And the last 23 years of my life, I'm working in healthcare. Although I always say I'm a developer in heart, because of the position, I'm managing all other domains of IT, including software development, infrastructure, even consultancy when it comes to ERP systems, and of course, HIS. I have a lot of HIS implementation. I am in UAE the last 8 years. And I have also a security background. I'm certified information security manager. And personally, I mean, it's something that I am really proud without bragging. I did the first ISO 27001 implementation in the first healthcare facility in Europe in 2009. Thank you for inviting me today.
It's an honor to have you here, and we are looking forward to a lot of insights from you this evening. Let me go to Mr. Vinci.
Hi. Salam alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vinci Vasudevan. I'm heading the Information Security and Service Management wing of Hamad Medical Corporation. We are basically the largest healthcare provider in the country, in the state of Qatar, with an employee base of around 30,000 plus. So going back to my education, I'm a graduate in computer science with a post-graduation in business administration, plus post-graduation in business informatica with various certifications. So my career line, if you look at it, it has been with construction, I mean, all into IT, but in construction domains, in healthcare domains, in aviation, and so on and so forth. So my major lies in healthcare domain. I've been in the current organization for 10 plus years, and my overall IT experience dates to around 25 plus. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Vinci. Seems a bit of a professional career seems alike, looking at the different sectors we have worked in. Anyway, we'll catch up sometime on that.
That's right. Yes.
Let me go to Mr. Ali Asgar.
Good afternoon, everyone. So some of them I know very well because we are in the same industry. Rama and Christos, yeah, we met before also. How are you guys? Fine. So talking about myself, I am a Senior Director IT for Zulekha Healthcare Group, and I am here in almost 2 decades in healthcare. So everyone has mentioned minimum more than 10 years, everybody is here and they are in healthcare domain. So from A to Z, only healthcare. We are just talking about healthcare. So that's it. And let's talk about now with our question and answers.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ali. It's an honor having you here on the board, being the most experienced healthcare IT professional here. So let me go to Mr. Shankar from Asimily.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Shankar. I'm the CEO and founder of Asimily. Asimily is a healthcare-focused inventory cybersecurity operational management solution for medical and IoT devices. So we are currently working with more than 1,700 health systems across the country here in US. My own background is that I've been involved with medical device security for the last 10 plus years, specifically on medical device cybersecurity. So before medical device cybersecurity and IoT security became a hot topic, I mean, I've been involved with the NIST cybersecurity framework in US. I was part of the original framework implementation as part of the US government. And then after that, I've been involved with every possible standard that you have heard of, whether it is, the MITRE attack frameworks or MITRE. So it's an area I've been involved for a long time. And I used to also be involved with Symantec. I used to run the business for Symantec, the cybersecurity company involved in medical device and IoT security. That's my background.
Thank you, Shankar. I think you are really add a big dynamics to this group. We all being healthcare providers and you being a solution provider. So I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. So with that, let me start with the first question to everybody. We are pretty much aware that the threat landscape has rapidly changed post-pandemic. And what do you think are the top threats healthcare professionals should focus on right now? And what do you think will be the sustainability of these solutions in the long run? Let me put that to Mr. Ali Asgar.
So see, after talking, let's talk about, even though before pandemic or after pandemic, security is always required, you cannot. And we are dealing with patient's life and the patient's confidentiality, patient's data, which is very, very, very important. As any other industry, but healthcare industry, if you talk about data of patients, it's very, very, very important. So going forward, if you talk about the security, you have to have so many measures which you have already, like I'm sure everybody is taking. And now if you see here in UAE, in this country, we are much ahead in terms of technology. So talking about healthcare, okay, so talking about healthcare, we are every day we have to connect here and there. So very importantly, you should have that kind of measures installed or implemented in your organization, which we have done it in terms of, just to give one example of ISO 27001, where we have implemented this almost 6 years, 2012 or 2013, we have implemented to keep this data secured in terms of all controls are in place. But again, you are you are not you are always open for anything. As previous panelists also, we have seen that they're talking about hackers who are much ahead than us, and they are just finding the loopholes to just put it into our system and get the things done as their way. And we are talking about ransomwares and all other things. So you have to, there is no other way you will be hacked. You are using smartphone, so by some or other way you are already hacked. So if you are connected to an internet, so if you're talking about healthcare and if you're talking about post pandemic, you have to get that controls implemented, rather than just to have some kind of firewalls or any other thing. So you have to see there are a lot of there are a lot of steps. It's not like only that hackers are coming. If you see, the inside users are more malicious than the outsider hackers. They don't require your data, but yes, insiders. So you have that USB controls in place, you have email security in place, and most important thing is to educate and communicate your users, which is very, very, very important. everything, if you see any attacks or anything, is not happening directly because you have you don't have, like, strong firewalls in place. But all of your users who don't know about which email should open, what needs to be done, which USB should take, which USB, so all these things can be prevented and taken care. And then you have all that controls. If you have implemented, you are good to go. But still, it's like, you are not 100% secure that everyone we know about it. Some or other way, there are ways for the hackers. If you find one, they will find two more to insert in your system. So we have to be more careful, and we should have all controls. Plus one more thing here, just I want to add, that you should have your backup systems in place. Okay, where plus you should have your DR ready. The two things are very, very important whenever I talk about security. Okay, you cannot stop them, but you should have your plan B ready, which is your DR and which is your backups. So if your backups are in place, your DR in place, you know that that's what. There is one more, like, I always tells in my conferences, and I suggest to others also, that you should get it done 22301 also, which is BCP ISO 22301, where you will have that kind of control, and your DR things are ready. So this is what is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for that insightful view. Nobody can definitely undermine the importance of information security education among the employees. And no matter how much you do it, you need to keep doing it, and not just for the sake of taking a checkbox that this is done and we will pass the audit. So, so it is very, very critical indeed. Let me, with this, let me go to
Ram, may I add something to that?
Please do. I mean, I was going to you actually. Yeah, I was coming to you.
So I totally agree with Aliasgar, what Aliasgar said. One thing that, the threats are the same, okay? Maybe some difference, but in percentage, but almost the same. The major difference between before a pandemic and now, I think it's the definition of what is inside user. Because right now the inside user is outside the premises. Speaking from security perspective, we were saying there are boundaries. We have a perimeter firewall, and now we have a data center firewall. But now there is no data center and perimeter because everybody is outside. So I think this is the major change. Inside user now, it's outside.
Absolutely, Mr. Christos, can't agree more, because with the trend of hybrid cloud environments and users working from anywhere, there is no defined perimeter anymore, and that is why I think the push to go towards software defined perimeter and zero trust solutions are getting more push nowadays. So let me get to Mr. Vinci on within healthcare, no matter whatever solutions that we are trying to implement today, how do you think we can sustain these solutions, and how do we monitor them constantly? Mr. Vinci, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry. Very good question, Mr. Ramakrishnan. Am I audible? Yes, right?
Yeah, you are now.
All right.
You are.
Okay. Healthcare organizations across the globe are facing the cyber attack for quite a long time. This is predominantly because of the protected health information. That's a gold mine which we all hold, right? So because of the longer shelf life of these and, the value for that in the black market, the dark web, which is 50 or more than that times costlier than financial information. The attack vectors has not changed dramatically, but our attack surface has gone up too much because of the pandemic and other reasons. According to FBI statistics, we have come across that since March 2020, there has been almost 400% increase in cyber attacks and the complaints related to that. And ransomware, as we said, continues to be on the top, followed by data breach incidents, DDoS attacks, insider threats, and so on and so forth. So coming back to sustainability of how to get rid, as we have been saying, it's only a matter of time that you get compromised. Security is not 100%. So first and foremost thing, get your people educated. Security is you in the center, and security is around you. So that's the first and foremost thing. You can add up technologies, you can add up anything. Build your people to be, your first line of defense. Here in the country, we have been empowered by the ministries, like, the supporting ministries like Ministry of Transport and Communication, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Supreme Committee of Legacy and Delivery, and Ministry of Public Health. All of them support us in leveraging their capabilities of delivering various cyber security trainings for the employee base. There are trainings that is being handled like cyber crime prevention for the entire, user base of the government entities. Plus, IT professionals are being trained on one more level, advanced trainings. And specifically, the information security guys are having at least 3 to 4 level advanced specialist trainings as well. So coming to that, and your information security governance should be built in such a robust way that you can have all the administrative, technical, and physical controls implemented so that your organization stays secure. As we all know, the perimeter, you have been saying that, right? The perimeter of your internal network seems to dissolve into the external network now. All of us, find it really, really hard to protect our organization. Attackers only need to get it once, but we need to get it 100% right every single time, right? So we have to employ the right governance methodologies. As I said, security awareness, put in the right tools and techniques in place. Do your patch management, ruthless patch management, I would say, ruthless patch management on a regular basis, and build in multi-factor authentications and zero trust. Of course, yes, we are coming to, all of us are going towards zero trust, but that's not a point of discussion now. Anyways, defense in depth, deception technologies, and all these, include that. And as healthcare, one of the major challenges that we would see is your medical devices security. So such things also needs to be understood properly, and all the medical devices also to be protected with the with the level of security controls that can be implemented in micro-segmentation, or you can bring in your third-party tools or whatever to protect all this. So I would recommend a combined methodology of all these, the people, process, and technology to get your sustained model in information security.
Thank you, Mr. Vinci. That was quite insightful, especially when you linked sustainability with end user training and security awareness. I think nobody can deny this point, and definitely that is a long-term goal. And technologies come and go. Technologies get they get old, they get replaced. But as long as your users are aware, they are the weakest link in the chain, as many people say. So if you can cover that link quite well, I think we can have a robust, sustainable, secure environment as much as we can. With this, let me, as you also spoke about the medical device, in the Internet of Medical Device thing, let me go to Mr. Shankar and let's hear his viewpoint on the challenges and the sustainability of the cyber threats that healthcare is facing today.
Yeah, so I think when you look at healthcare, right, I think people have spoken about some of the top threats. Ransomwares are there, insider threats are there, actually a lot of misconfigurations as well, because as people have adopted, because of the COVID era, a lot of people have moved a lot more to telehealth and a lot of digital adoption, and that has caused a lot of misconfigurations because people are doing quickly, and that has left, parts for the attacker. So when you look at all of this, to protect this environment, you need to take a number of steps. Some of, everybody, Christos, Aliasgar, and Vinci have alluded to some of that. Obviously, user training is a very important thing, because if the user is not aware, then you really can't secure anything. And a lot of attacks in healthcare, we have done study across 1,700 sites in US. A lot of attacks in healthcare are originating because people are clicking on phishing links, or they don't even know how to respond. Someone calls them and then they give out their credit card details, or they give their name and password thinking that it's coming from HR. So there is user training required. The second aspect is, in our experience, a lot of healthcare organizations don't know all the assets that are there in the environment. So you can only protect what you know. You can only be careful about what you know in the environment. And what we have observed is there is a lot of devices that healthcare organizations have forgotten about. So there might be that old ultrasound that's sitting somewhere, or there's an old infusion pump sitting in a closet. And, we had actually a health system where there was a vulnerability scanner that was so old that it had actually been infected, and it was actually scanning other devices and infecting them. So if you don't even know what's there in the environment, then you're pretty much chasing your tail. So you got to know what's really there in the environment. And then from a cybersecurity perspective, obviously you have a number of things that you're doing, Aliasgar, Christos, you all alluded to it, like whether it is anti-malware or, email gateway, disaster recovery capabilities, incident response capabilities. So you can go through a number of security solutions and you can talk about all the need. And then the final problem in healthcare is you see the number of vulnerabilities that are coming out daily. And Vinci referred to that with medical and IoT devices is almost like 50 to 100. I mean, that's what we have calculated. Last year alone, there were 20,000 vulnerabilities that were published. And the number of patches that were published were 200 from manufacturers. So for every one vulnerability, or 20 or 200, for every one vulnerability, for every 1,000 vulnerabilities, there was one patch released by a manufacturer. So when you look at that and healthcare, what they have to deal with, you have to have a strategy to take care of this, and we can discuss it more, but you have to have a strategy to take care of this, because you have all these assets, you have people who are not trained as well, so you got to train them, you have to find out where your assets have to put a number of solutions. But if to not just do what is reactive, but a number of things are coming every day, and you have to keep up with it. And that's where the challenge for healthcare rises, especially when you consider medical and IoT devices don't even have patches. So then it becomes a challenging environment, and you have to account for that as well.
Thank you, Shankar. I think healthcare, when you talk about healthcare and cybersecurity together, there are so many dimensions to it that you cannot really prioritize one over the other. You can, but ultimately you have to cover all the dimensions. So yeah, definitely a very valid point, Mr. Shankar, about patching. And when you talk about patching, I just want to check with all our panelists that, there are a lot of vulnerabilities, thousands of vulnerabilities which are getting published every month. And as you rightly pointed out, Mr. Shankar, there are very limited patches available. So how do you recommend that we manage these vulnerabilities? I will come to you, Mr. Shankar, at the end. I would like to have the views of, let's go with Mr. Ali first.
Yeah. So what Mr. Shankar has said, yeah, there are a lot of vulnerabilities around medical devices. Yeah. And we also know, and we saw that because now each and every medical device comes with some or other network connectivity. Either they are connected with the network or they're connected with the Wi-Fi. We have mobile ultrasound machines which are connected to the Wi-Fi. So protecting this, that's my suggestion, or what we have implemented in organization, is keeping them on separate VLAN. Okay, just technical I'm talking about. So keeping them that there is a separate VLAN for the medical devices, and whenever it is required to talk, then only you can talk or you can connect that devices with your network. That's one way to protect. Okay, there are a lot of things where you cannot protect even your VLANs also. That's okay. But again, just to add this, that when you found this kind of vulnerabilities with your medical device, this is the one way which we have implemented, and we are doing it not right away, like after pandemic or before pandemic. We are doing from long time, where we have separated all biomedical devices with the actual your network. So that's the one way which I thought, and what we have implemented and working quite well. But again,
again, it's not 100%. There might be something where you have not installed on like in dental machines. Okay, they are separately connected. It's not connected. They're directly connected with normal one PC, where you have there your antivirus or anything goes wrong, then there are chances can infect your network also. And one thing what we have seen here is, as Mr. Vinci has also mentioned, that all attacks, more attacks are happened in terms of COVID, and the organizations were healthcare. So, on healthcare, it was more attacks that happened other than any other organization. So healthcare domain was very much affected in terms of attackers and in terms of hackers in COVID era. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. I think, yeah, the technique that you mentioned is a very well recommended one, where you go for segmentation to restrict the attack to a certain segment and not let it spread across, or to other segments, which is a very well known technique. And I think, yeah, that's something that can prevent attacks. Now, let me go to Mr. Christos on how do you suggest on managing vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so let me go, adding to what Aliaska said again. So that's true. And segmentation in your network, it's always help, but it's not preventive, okay? It's you try to minimize the loss, which is, again, it's something good. But I think I want to share a couple of numbers. So we heard that it will be about $1 trillion investments in cybersecurity last year. So 1 trillion. That means that we have a power because we are the spenders right now, right? So everyone in this panel, almost everyone, we spend this amount of money. So that means that we have a power. So we have to involve in this cybersecurity. We have to involve our partners. When I'm saying partners, even medical device companies. So whenever we go and buy ultrasound on any monitor or whatever, we have to tell them that it's their responsibility to keep it up to date. Maybe have a maintenance contract linked to that. Maybe involve them in the case of a breach. So if there is an impact, it will have impact to them as well. Maybe use it in a social media or something like that. So they will invest. These companies will invest more money in cybersecurity. So involving the manufacturer, I think it's the best solution to be a little bit more preventive. So yeah, coming back to the question, can you please repeat your question?
No, it is the same question. How do you suggest we manage with the increasing number of vulnerabilities and very limited patches being released? What would be your suggestion on that?
Of course, listen, if I speak with my technical hat, I will say we have to implement maybe AI or maybe a patch management solution, not focus only on OS products, Microsoft products, or networking products, but include medical device, because information is partial everywhere. Okay, so but I don't want to speak from this. I want to come back to something that all our esteemed panelists mentioned, which is related to continuous training and awareness of the weakest link, we said, right? And we meant the end users. So I will tell you something, you will not be surprised. Who is the weakest user? The weakest users are the C-suite. Why? Because they have access to everything. So we need to invest a little bit to create a company culture. This is what I'm trying to do as my whole IT life. Create a company culture. So I want when I'm going to ask 10 millions for security investment, I want my CFO say, why 10 millions only? So Christos, we should secure our data. I mean, it's our responsibility. The same applies to my CEO. So creating a company culture, understanding that security of information, it's our job, not our IT team job, but our job as a company. This will help a lot, and this will minimize the risk more than any patch management solution that I can have, and not any automation I will have.
Thank you, Mr. Christos. Let me put the same question to Mr. Vinci.
Okay, it was great insight from Shankar, Christos, and Aliasgar on the vulnerabilities and the medical devices. Yes, you are rightly said this. You know, all of us are facing this challenge. most of the medical devices comes with an outdated operating system, and the manufacturers themselves does not have a possibility of upgrading it to the latest version at anytime soon. So what is the way? Mostly it is segmented and protected under that segment. So the containment is done if in case there is a breakout, right? So keeping that aside, you are talking about vulnerability. As I mentioned earlier, this should be in our DNA. Patching should be in our DNA. You should patch your systems properly on a timely basis. Do vulnerability scans, do patch management, proper patch management. This is the only way you can keep yourself up to date. You can keep on investing on technology day by day, but it doesn't take you there. Most of the medical devices, as I said, cannot be patched also. That's one of the major challenges. Like maybe all my co-panel speakers can tell this about the medical device security. When you buy the devices, you can assess the security level of the devices by looking at the MDS2 form, which is the manufacturer's disclosure for medical device security. You can assess that, and that's how we procure probably. I wanted to tell you that we assess that and then we procure the devices. But after that, what happens? Most of the manufacturers will not or may not upgrade their devices. So, patch management in that area is always great. So the rest of the infrastructure, you need to ensure that your vulnerabilities are patched properly. So, for example, in the case of, in our case, basically, we do regular vulnerability assessment and patching. In addition to that, our regulators like the Ministry of Transport and Communication, Qatar, QCert, we call it, they also send their vulnerability notification to us. And, we are bound by time to fix all these vulnerabilities. So we do that, based on the priorities on, in a 2-hour window max, and the earliest was done within 30 minutes. So again, that should be in your DNA. Patch your systems, keep it up to date, safe and sound.
Thank you, Vinci, for that insight. I think let me share one of my experience with one of my previous healthcare organizations, where we basically created vulnerability management and patch management as a single process we started quarterly, and then we tried to get it done monthly. It was very difficult. Everybody was very overloaded. But as the process matured, it became very easy. Everyone understood the impact of each patch on their particular systems. Each and every server was assigned a business owner and not just a technical IT owner. And this way we were really able to achieve that continuous cycle of vulnerability assessment and patch management. I hope that helps. With this, let me, I'm not sure how much time more we have. Karan, could you just let us know?
Yes, I think we will have to wrap this up soon. We are already running short of time.
Okay, great. Fine. Let me just go to Mr. Shankar and ask him about how should you think organizations should think about risk of devices at procurement. If you could add more insight on that, Mr. Shankar.
Yeah, I think, it actually follows from your question on vulnerability management. We spoke a lot about, segmentation and training and all of that, which is definitely very important. But, our experience is that health systems are churning around 10 to 15% of their devices every year when you look at medical and IoT, especially where there's a lot of procurement. And if you really want to get ahead of the cybersecurity problem, you got to look at cybersecurity at procurement, and you got to have ways to mitigate it. And there are a few ways to do it. The first one is really, when you buy a device, you have to assess the risk of a device. Now, we are very aware that health systems can't always say no to a device, because sometimes a doctor needs it and there's a clinical need for it. And so you have to buy a device, with respect to what the situation is. But you have to assess the risk and understand what is the risk of the device you're bringing into the organization. Mr. Vinci, you spoke about MDS2. Some people use S-bombs, which is software bill of materials. Some people just do a manual risk assessment. There are many ways. But the idea is to do a risk assessment, understand where the risks are going to lie, understand what kind of mitigation controls you're going to apply. And all of that is important before you bring in the device. Because if you bring in a device and you haven't done it, then you're effectively again, chasing the problem instead of getting ahead of it. So that's definitely one aspect of doing a pre-procurement risk analysis. The second aspect of it is, just yesterday, coincidentally, I was on a call with a very large global manufacturer, along with a very large health system in US, talking to them along with the CISO, CIO, and the head of procurement, along with the manufacturer. And the discussion was, they are not going to provide patches. They actually are buying a Windows 8 operating system. That's what the doctors want. So what kind of contractual languages, and Mr. Christos mentioned about the amount you guys spend. So you have power. So what kind of contractual languages can you introduce with the manufacturer to kind of protect you? So for example, some of the things they were asking about, we were negotiating for yesterday at procurement was, if the health system were to put compensating controls, you're not going to get patches, but if they were to put compensating controls around the device, they wanted the manufacturer to give them, guidance on what kind of compensating controls will affect the clinical operation, what will not. They wanted to get evidence of if there's any critical vulnerability, what is that critical vulnerability, what kind of workarounds can they apply. So right at procurement, not only are they doing a risk assessment, they're putting contractual language in the manufacturer contract that allows them to take certain level of measures, which the manufacturer will then not come back behind them and say this is going to invalidate the warranty. So definitely they're taking two critical measures, and I think those are important. And then there are a few other things they're doing in terms of evaluation and training on how to use the device in the appropriate manner. But I think if you take some of these actions, you'll probably be ahead, and you can use your power to make sure that it's going the right way with the manufacturer as well.
Thank you so much for that insight, Shankar. I'm going to talk to my procurement team right after this call. Following up with this, Shankar, being a solution provider, what kind of market needs do you see are actually emerging right now? And how do you see Asimily evolving in the future to meet those needs?
Yeah, so one big aspect, of course, you guys have discussed is vulnerability management. People spoke about segmentation, training, Alias guys spoke about segmentation, Krista spoke about training, Vinci spoke about patching. People are talking a lot about exploit analysis now. So a big trend that we're seeing, at least across health systems, US and across international, is people are looking at where are the attackers going to come from in their environment, what are the attack paths, what are the attack chains, and then figuring out how you can mitigate them. We actually had a health system, they segmented the entire network, but the path of the attacker actually came from a supplier. So they actually attacked a supplier and they entered, and that was nicely segmented to a medical device. So they had created a clean path for the attacker. And so understanding where the attacker is going to come from is a very key thing we are seeing. So there's a lot of work around that, around exploit analysis. The other thing that people are talking a lot about as ransomware comes about is incident response. Now, Mr. Aliasgar spoke a lot about, data prevention and data backup, but a lot of talk now is about, forensic analysis, because, how do you capture data at the point of attack so that if something were to happen, you can analyze it and you can find the root cause and eliminate the root cause in your network. Otherwise, you've just eliminated the symptom. So there's a lot of talk about incident response. And then there's a third talk about benchmarking. Everybody wants to see where they are compared to every other health system in the country or every other health system in their region. So how far can you go? Because like you said, Mr. Ramakrishnan, cybersecurity is like a multidimensional problem. How far can you go? So people are continuously looking to benchmark them against every other health system, every other organization that they know of, and then see how far are they from the benchmark, how much better they can be, and then what actions they should take. So some of these we are seeing right now, which I think is pertinent to the kind of things people are facing.
Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Shankar. Before we wrap up, I would like to, like each one of you to give your takeaways for the day to the audience. What would you advise the audience? Let me start with Mr. Ali.
Yeah, for me, whenever we talk about security, I have only one word, and that's communication, communication, and communication. That's it. So that's the main thing, the first line of defense, which is very important. And other things, we are there to take care. So we are doing it. Like, you talk about any CTO or any CISO or any CIO, they are doing their best. Everyone does their best to prevent that kind of attacks, because it's their headache to again get it done, everything back to the normal. So most important thing is communicate, communicate, and communicate about your security things and implement best controls in terms of certifications. I always suggest to have ISO in place. The controls are in place. Just monitor in terms of as usual, regular monitoring what you do, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Mr. Vinci, what's your last advice to the
I did mention this in the first question. Security, you in the center. It is you, me, and you are in the center for security. Without us, security is not possible. That is the first line of defense. As Mr. Ali Asgar also said, educate and communicate. That's the first line of defense. If we get that right, the rest, everything can be managed by technology and the other part of governance. So with that, I think I thank you all, and thank you, Mr. Ramakrishnan and all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Christos. What is your advice, Mr. Christos, to the audience?
Not an advice. What I'm trying to do my whole IT life. So being an IT department in a hospital, we're a support department, okay? But if I speak with the finance hat, let's say in financial terms, we're a cost center. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm working hard to that, is to convince my senior management that we are not a cost center, we're a profit center. And especially when we invest in cybersecurity, we increase the profit because we decrease the loss. So this is one thing that we have to understand, and we have to work towards that. And I have a KPI for all of us, okay? So we discuss about training and company culture and how we create this awareness to our senior management. You know what? I will feel that I will have 100% of my KPI if in the next Cyber Warriors webinar, we will have our C-suite here discussing about cybersecurity, not from technical perspective, but from all other aspects. So if I see CEOs, CMOs, and CNOs here, I will say, yes, I succeeded, I did it. So thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, everybody. I'll just like to conclude that was great insights from each one of you. And to add to your point, cybersecurity as one of the markers of cybersecurity is also availability. So it's not always about restricting, it's also about making it available, which means more available it is, the more business that you get. Most organizations do not realize this until they have been attacked. And I think it's better to be prepared rather than repent later. Thank you, everyone. And with this, I hand over to Mr. Karan.
Thank you, Rama, for great moderating. Great moderator, yeah.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you for the opportunity.
Before I can let everyone go, we have two questions from the audience. So maybe, Ramakrishnan, if you can just maybe take them up, and then we can wrap it up.
Sure, sure. So this question is to Mr. Shankar. Where do you perceive maximum scope of improvement in terms of hospitals' existing infrastructure across Middle East?
That's an interesting question. Every hospital is different. So there's no one size fits all that says that this applies to every hospital across the Middle East. Everyone has their own processes. Everyone has their own thing. I would say, if I had to generally look across my 15 years of experience, globally, I've sold into Middle East, I've interacted with, Europe, US. I would say it's broadly the principles rather than saying something has to be done across every hospital in Middle East. Training, I think that was clearly mentioned. I think people have to be trained. Educate. Awareness is the other thing that is very important. Awareness of everything that's there in the environment, awareness of what the risks are. Because if you're not aware, then you cannot prioritize, because you can't do everything at every time. So to be aware of what you're trying to solve, and then you can find a prioritization of what you need to do. And then you can take the appropriate steps on what is your top risk and where your top priorities lie, so you can act on them. And then finally, I think you have to realize that there is a shadow IT, and then there are devices that you don't know of. There are devices you cannot handle. So whether it is, patching, or whether it is segmentation, or whether it is looking at where the exploits are going to come from, finding the right technique that is suitable for your organization, so you can make sure that you find where the attacks are going to come from and protect against it is going to be very important. So it's not, again, a one size fits all, but I think it's a combination of these techniques that we discussed in this call that is really going to help you get there.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. I think that would answer the question of our anonymous attendee. We have another question directed to Mr. Christos here. Where do you see maximum traction happening in RAK Hospital and other similar health systems across Middle East, and why?
Yeah, so we are discussing the last 3 to 5 years about digital transformation, and I'm sure every hospital is during their journey to be digitally transformed, means adopt more and more and more IT systems. And this by itself, it's a high risk process. From FQH perspective is that we don't have this journey. We're not digitally transformed. We have to start as a full digital hospital because we are a brand new player in the market. Now, the highest risk is in previous systems, we had the idea that, you know what, we have patient information in one system, maybe your HIS, maybe your ISPACs of the clinical systems. The way that everything is integrated, the information can be sparse in so many different systems. You can be part of your ERP, it can be part of your RCM tools, it can be part of your analytics, it can be anywhere. So I think one of the major risk is that information can be anywhere, can be on premises or out premises in a different format, and we have to work towards mitigate the risk of security breach and take the right security measurements.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. With that, we come to the end of the session, and November is going to be the last and the final edition of the Cyber Warriors Conclave virtual editions, because I'm very delighted and excited to let you all know that we are going to be having a physical Cyber Warriors Conclave in the first quarter of next year. So it's the end of all the virtual editions, and we will be reaching out to each one of you and be inviting you for the physical edition as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice to see you again, guys. Take care.
See you. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Ramakrishnan.
Bye.